Hey, Wild Southers. Eddie Nickens here. We're so glad to have you on the line. But we want to take a quick moment to preface this upcoming interview with the news that sadly, very sadly, Alvin Dedeaux's wife recently passed away a few weeks after this episode was taped. But with Alvin's permission, we want to roll this conversation as it happened, because it just so happens that Alvin Dedeaux is one of the classiest, most humane individuals we know of in the South. So our love and our best to him and to his children in what we know is a difficult, difficult time. In our show notes, you can find details on the GoFundMe account that's been set up by Alvin's many, many friends. And to our listeners, to this growing Wild South family, thanks for being here.
I was out on the Llano River and we were just loading the boat up, and I looked down and there's this chartreuse flip-flop just floating down the river. I was like, that's the perfect color for a frog popper.
Welcome to the Wild South Podcast. I'm Dave DeBenedetto, Editor-in-Chief of Garden & Gun magazine.
And I'm Eddie Nickens, contributing editor for Garden & Gun.
Together, we're talking with the most interesting outdoorsmen and outdoors women in the South and beyond.
Quail hunters and duck hunters, trout anglers and redfish fanatics, musicians, scientists, writers, wild game cooks, and frankly, a few wildcats we dig up along the way.
We're talking with legends and legends in the making.
All with unforgettable stories of life way beyond the sidewalk. Today we're talking to Alvin Dedeaux, and he is a guide in Austin, Texas. This dude, he spends a lot of time in flip-flops way off the sidewalk. He's got his own guiding and outfitting service, All Water Guides. He's done trash cleanups. He's got an incredible YouTube presence. He's a social media master, ambassador for all kinds of brands. This guy has Texas dialed in.
Yeah, man. So he came across our radar, Garden & Gun. He was a champion of conservation. He was first recommended to us by Simon Perkins, the CEO of Orvis, for the amazing work he did at the LoCo Trash Bash, which is an event that he created, and we're going to hear more about that. And just his enthusiasm for that area of the world. Who knew Austin, Texas, as a fishing hotbed? I mean, so fun to talk to Alvin, and such a cool dude. So what do you say we get right to it?
Let's do it. Alvin Dedeaux is in the house, man. We are so excited to have you, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm just delighted to have you here on the podcast with us, Alvin. I know you're a former champion of conservation in the pages of Garden & Gun, and I know you're a former lead singer, and I know you are now currently just a badass fishing guide and shop owner, so welcome.
Well, I'm going to say that most of those things are true. Because I'm such a modest guy.
Hey, my niece moved to Austin last year.
Yeah.
I know Austin's this little hamlet out there. I figured maybe you bumped into her at some point. I know it's a pretty small town, not much happening in Austin these days, right?
Yeah. Well, when I moved here in 1982, there was 350,000 people, and the biggest single population in the city was UT, about 50,000. Wow. It's always been about 50,000. So when school was out, it was a pretty noticeable difference in the activity in town. But I think I know we're over 1 million. Ugh. I hear that the metropolitan area is getting closer to like 1.8 or something. So I haven't seen her.
All right. I was doing a little research, Alvin. And
oh, no.
I mean, obviously, a lot of folks know you were the lead singer in a punk rock band.
A funk band that was a bunch of punk rock musicians.
Okay. All right. Noted.
Well, listen up now while I give you a taste of my philosophy. That's what I'm talking about.
Is it true that Nirvana opened up for you guys?
They did. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, tell me about that.
So the funny thing is I never really thought much of it until somebody reminded me years later, sent me a flyer from the gig. I think they actually did like maybe 3 or 4 shows opening for us.
Wow.
Man, I don't know, maybe 1990, something like that.
Yeah.
I barely remember them from one of the shows. But the story I really like is about the last show that we probably would have done with Nirvana that did not happen. It was South by Southwest. I don't remember, maybe 1992. And we had decided we weren't going to play at the festival. At that time, it was a thing for undiscovered bands to get discovered. So we're like, we'd already gotten a record deal. So we're like, we're just going to chill. But the organizers convinced us that we should play. And they said, you can pick the night, you can pick the venue, and you can pick the other bands that are going to play with you, which is unheard of. So we're like, okay, sure. We'll play at our friends club on a Saturday night. And we have these 2 bands, friends of ours from Seattle, that are going to come to Austin for South by Southwest. So we'll have them play with us. And it was going to be Nirvana was the opening act. The middle band was going to be Cat Butt, which is another band from Seattle that was actually much more popular than Nirvana at the time. And then we were going to headline the show. And about a month before South by Southwest, Kurt Cobain calls our guitar player and says, hey, man, I'm sorry. We're not going to be able to make it to South by Southwest because Cat Butt broke up. We were going to kind of hitch a ride with them.
Oh, wow.
We can't afford to get to Austin on our own, so we'll see y'all next time. And then like the next time I heard anything from Nirvana was like on the radio, Smells Like Teen Spirit. So that was more exciting than the shows they did open for us, the one they did not open for us.
Wow. All right, remind me of the name of the band.
It was Bad Mother Goose and the Brothers Grimm.
Yes. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Who came up with that?
I have no idea. We sat around forever. So it was like I said, it was a straight up 70s style funk band, but we all came from the punk rock scene. So we played with a lot of punk rock bands. I mean, like, I don't know if we ever played with the Butthole Surfers. That was another huge band from Austin, but they would come to our shows and occasionally jump on stage with us and make noise, So it was that era. So there was a lot of mixing. People used to say if you turn the sound down at a Bad Mother Goose show, you would think it was some crazy punk rock show, but the music was like Sly and the Family Stone, Parliament Funkadelic, that type of stuff, but all original.
You were lead singer, guitarist, what?
I was definitely not the best singer, but I was the guy that stood in the middle and probably was the loudest. I guess I was the front man. I was more of an entertainer than a singer. And if you look it up on YouTube, I'm just going to say parental advisory.
I can't
Not
wait.
necessarily for lyrics, but for my personal banter with the audience in between songs. The songs were actually pretty PG, but for some reason I had to take it to an R level most days.
Do you play anymore?
Not really.
No.
In the car by myself on long road trips is about the only time I'll sing. My kids don't want to hear me sing. Occasionally I'll pull out an old video or something and they're just like, oh my God, Dad. Although I will say, we made a music video in 1992 that I hadn't seen until maybe the last year or so. And it was, I'm going to say for sure, the first, maybe the only time there was somebody in a float tube, fly fishing and rapping. And that was me. I was in 1992 fly fishing and rapping at the same time. It's in the video. I was like, okay, well, that's pretty groundbreaking. So
That's cool.
yeah, so I'm still fishing, but the music has gone by the wayside. I tell people I retired from that career a long time ago.
So you leave that world, and how quickly did you step into the fly fishing world as a guide, what was that transition like?
It was almost immediate because we were fortunate enough to make enough money to quit our day jobs, which was like a big deal for a musician. But, being in Austin, that was during the slacker era. My rent and bills for the month were like $225, So I didn't need to make a lot of money to quit the day job. But because we weren't like a band that played every night, we played on the weekends and we went on tour and we made enough money to pay our bills. So I had most of my weekdays off. So I did a lot of fishing during the band years.
Got it.
I could show up at a gig in Dallas, drive my car to the gig with all my fishing gear, my camping gear, and leave Saturday night and be like, oh, by the way, I won't be at practice this week because I'm driving to New Mexico. I'm going to fish all week, and I will meet y'all at the next gig in Houston next Friday.
Wow.
So it was great. So I got to do a lot of fishing. But while I was doing that, I was hanging out, if I was in town, at the fly shop, the Austin Angler, where I really kind of got way more into it. I had some mentors there that taught me a whole lot of stuff about fly fishing. So I basically hung out there all the time. And when I got out of the band, sort of abruptly, I just was like, I got to do something else. But I did have some other musical options. I could have moved to San Francisco. There was another band that's like, move out here and you won't have to get a job or nothing. You'll be living in San Francisco in a band. And had another deal in Seattle. And I was at the fly shop talking to the guy that owned the place. I was like going, man, I'm kind of at a crossroads, you know. It's like I quit my band, but I got these other options. And he just said, why don't you work at the fly shop? And I was like, what? And he said, just try it out for 6 months. If you don't like it, I'll give you the best recommendation you've ever gotten. And I was like, well, I never got any recommendations, so it'll be the best one. So he's like, yeah, you hang out here all the time. You've listened to us for years now. You know everything we know. And I've actually thought multiple times about asking you to work at the shop, but you're like, this dude's got way too much other stuff going on. But the thing was, I was like, hell yeah, I'll do it. So I was at the shop almost immediately and was there for probably the last 10 years. The Austin Angler shut down in July of 2004. Just started working the counter and then got to where I was the buyer, the manager, head guide, all this stuff. And then September 11th happened. A lot of our business was based on guys traveling the world fishing. That kind of petered out, and a lot of mom and pop fly shops shut down in that period, and we were one of the victims of that. eBay and the internet, all that stuff happened. But fortunately, I had started guiding shortly after I started working there, so when the place closed down, I just kind of hit the ground running. So I had a really long runway from a guy working at a shop to a guy that had a clientele built up, enough to be able to just guide full time.
Hey, Alvin, let's go back a little bit, because you didn't grow up in Austin, right? You grew up in Houston.
Houston. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And you fished and you hunted. Tell us a little bit about growing up. Tell us a little bit about the ballet classes that you took.
Man, you guys did some research, didn't you?
Hey, we're serious journalists here, Alvin. We ain't messing around.
Man, okay, so I was the first of 6 kids. My mom wanted to have 6 daughters. She was an only child. So she had me, and then she had 5 daughters after that.
Wow.
So I had a pretty interesting childhood just because my mom was really focused on the girls. So I took ballet lessons. I took tap lessons. I took piano. I took guitar. I didn't want to do any of it. But, and my mom thought that was hilarious years later when, so now you're in a band. I bet you wish you would have taken those piano lessons a little bit more seriously. Maybe you wouldn't have to just be the singer. You could be writing songs.
Make something out of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But then on the flip side, I fished with my grandmother and grandfather, my mom's parents, probably as much as I did with my dad. And my dad had an older brother and a younger brother that lived in Houston. They both had sons around my age. They grew up hunting and fishing. I mean, their dad in the swamps in Mississippi built wooden fishing boats and hand-sewed fishing nets.
Wow.
So the whole fishing and hunting thing was like in my DNA, basically. So I definitely was more into the fishing thing than the hunting. But, I did tons of hunting growing up as a kid. Never shot a deer, but I don't think on our deer hunting trips, I don't think it was about so much shooting a deer as it was just going away and hiding out for a few days and drinking a bunch of beer, which is, I can't imagine that, how great that must have been. My dad, his two brothers, and then his two brothers' sons, all of us out doing this cool stuff. Between the three of them, one of them always had a boat, so we'd fish together. That's a pretty awesome time.
That's pretty special. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, you, and I think we have this in common, you're a self-taught fly angler, right?
Oh, yeah.
I was largely self-taught. I started fly fishing when I was 22. And Alvin, let me tell you, I knew so little about fly fishing and trout. I grew up in eastern North Carolina, so I went to the mountains on my very first fly fishing trip. We were camping. I came back to camp to show off my first trout to my pals. It was this little bitty fish, and it was kind of pale, but I was still stoked. And they said, dude, that's a chub. So do you have any epic moments of early fly fishing success like that?
I got that first fly rod for my 12th birthday after I read about fly fishing in a book at school. It was a fishing book, and it just had like one chapter on fly fishing. And I was so taken by it that I actually stole the book, took it home so I could like reread it over and over.
Wow.
And just getting the fly rod and figuring out how to cast and tying some flies. I was really into like model building. So I had all kinds of balsa wood and tools and paint and stuff. And like a couple of really early memories I have of actually being successful with the fly rod. I tied like a huge balsa wood frog fly that I contact cemented a green rubber balloon to the balsa wood. I mean, it's like, I wish I had it now, but I remember that distinctly. I was like 12 years old.
Wow.
And I caught a big old bass on that thing because I remember I was fishing with my grandpa and one of his buddies. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher, and so him and his preacher buddies had access to everybody's stock tanks, Reverend Jones, anytime you want to go over there and fish. So they'd go over there, and these things never got fished. And I remember we caught a bunch on the cane pole, caught a bunch of bass, and of course we were keeping them and eating them. And I was like, well, let me try this thing, and my grandpa's like, I mean, if they're stupid enough to go for that, I'll be impressed, And I caught a big, at the time seemed like 8 pounds. It was probably like a 2-pound fish, but I caught a huge bass on that balsa wood frog with balloon rubber on it. That was one. And then I remember another time going with my dad and at least one of my uncles and one cousin, maybe it may have been the whole crew. And we were fishing in the bay, Galveston Bay or Trinity Bay, I can't remember, and catching speckled trout. And we had a limit. So they were like, well, let's head in. And I was like, whoa, before we head in, let me get my fly rod out. And they were like, oh. So everybody went and sat on the other side of the boat. And I got my fly rod out and started waving around. There was some school of fish. They weren't mullet. I know that much. There was some school of fish that came swimming through, and I was just hooking them on every cast on my fly rod. Yeah. And then my uncle and my cousin and my dad were all like, oh my God. They were shocked. And I was like, yep, told y'all.
That is too cool. I remember, my first fly rod fish was a sea trout under the lights.
Oh, yeah.
On a little glass minnow thing that I think I pretended to tie. I'd caught lots and lots of fish, but when you did it with a fly rod, wow, take it to a whole nother level. Yeah.
Yep. That's phase one.
That's
just
right.
Getting that first one on the fly.
So I feel like I'm pretty well versed in fishing and the opportunities around the country. And I got to say, I was really impressed and surprised by everything that Austin offers.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's definitely not a well-known fly fishing destination, but we have a really strong fly fishing community here, number one. There's a lot of people in Austin that fly fish all over the world, but we've got a lot of water. So, just in downtown Austin, Lady Bird Lake, which is a dammed up portion of the Colorado, people have caught 10 and 12 pound bass out of there.
Yep.
And that's right in town. But then we've got the whole series of lakes above town. We've got 5 reservoirs, within an hour of Austin. And then we've got kind of in the central part of the state, the hill country, we've got a ton of smaller streams and a few bigger rivers, the Guadalupe River, the Brazos River a little bit further north, and the Colorado River, which is the lake that's in the middle of downtown Austin. There's a dam at the bottom end of town, and then there's the Colorado River is free flowing for 300 miles to the coast. And then it's about 3 hours to get to the coast. And then, of course, the Texas coast.
Right.
And there's an endless amount.
Yeah, legendary.
Yeah. So we got some really amazing scenery and our little Guadalupe bass, our state fish, which is mostly just found in this central part of the state. I think that's one of the things that's helped me and our guide business be successful is we just happen to be here in a place that has a lot of fishing that not a lot of people knew about. So we were able to kind of just jump in and go like, yeah, you don't have to go to Montana. Montana's great, but
Right. I mean, you have trout, right?
We do. We have one trout stream. It's a tailwater. It's pretty well managed. They manage it as a trophy trout fishery.
Right.
And when conditions are right, there are holdover fish. There's usually some holdover fish every year. Our issue with that is just water. We need water in the lake so that there's enough flow in the river. But that's our wintertime fishery. So that's the other thing about Austin and Texas in general is that we have year-round fishing. So the slowest time of year for most of our native fish is going to be during the winter. And that's prime time for the trout fishing. So
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so it kind of keeps it going.
What about that Guadalupe bass? That's a fish I would love to catch. I love the native species and the unsung. I don't know a ton about it. I mean, does it grow is as large as a largemouth or more like a smallmouth or?
It's even smaller than the smallmouth.
Okay, got it.
It's a member of the spotted bass family. So they're only found in Texas. They're mostly just found in central Texas. And they are a stream fish, like they have evolved in these small hill country streams. And there's some real interesting facts about them. Is part of the reason they don't grow very large is because they grow quickly. So I just found out some of this stuff recently, like they're sexually mature at 1 year old. So like an old Guadalupe bass is like 5 or 6 years old. They don't live a long time. But the thing is these streams, we go through these drought and flood cycles where they'll all get blown out 1 year because the water's flowing 100,000 CFS. And then the next 2 years later, you got 2 CFS and the streams dry up. But they can repopulate a stream like really quickly because of that ability to spawn after just, 1 year. So they are, like I said, mostly a stream fish. So they're in the lakes that are, the Colorado River chain, because that's also where the biggest Guadalupe bass are caught. But, it's almost like fishing for brookies in some high mountain stream,
Which is a thing that Eddie and I love.
So you could come here and say like the Llano River or the San Marcos River, some of the small streams with like a 4-weight and a foam hopper, and on a good day, 50, 60 Guadalupe bass. Yeah, it's
cool.
It's just like what you're imagining, just like hopping from pool to pool, it's pretty cool.
And it's a gorgeous fish. I mean, it's like these tiger striped smallmouth almost, and they're spawning about now. Is that right? Next couple of months?
Yeah. That's it's kind of a mystery. So it's funny. The thing about the Guadalupe bass is not a lot of stuff was known about them. I mean, they almost became extinct because back in the 70s or maybe even the late 60s, Texas Parks and Wildlife didn't know any better and dumped smallmouth in a bunch of the Guadalupe streams, and they started crossbreeding, and they were like, these fish could be gone, if we don't do something. So they had a really aggressive hatchery and stocking program to basically just overpopulate the streams with the Guadalupe DNA, which is the first time that's ever been tried, and it's worked. So they just kind of out-competed the smallmouth. So they're pretty much gone in most places. But my favorite river, the Colorado River, which is our biggest stream, has the biggest Guadalupe bass. And for the longest time, even the biologists thought the ones in that stream were hybrids because they were so much bigger than everywhere else. Well, it's the biggest river that they live in for the most part, so it makes sense they'd be bigger. But a couple of the biologists were like, yeah, we think those are pure Guadalupe bass. And years ago told one of our guides, because he was showing this biologist all these pictures, like, hey, if you catch another giant Guadalupe bass like that, you might want to keep it. And that's actually what led to one of our clients catching, I think somebody may have caught one larger recently, but the record for Guadalupe bass stood for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And one of our clients on a trip caught this Guadalupe bass. The guide's like, hey, man, we need to hang on to that one. The guy's like, no, I ain't killing this fish. So it was a long day, but they actually got that fish in perfect condition back to a ramp. They were met by a Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist.
Oh, love it.
Kept the fish alive, took it to the Cabela's, weighed it on their certified scale, put it in the tank at Cabela's. He got a tentative record. They didn't give him a record until after they DNA tested the fish and said, oh, it's a pure Guadalupe bass. Well, that was the beginning of a 3-year-long Guadalupe bass survey on the Colorado River, which we learned a lot of stuff about them since then. But one of the first questions, I'm looping back to what you said a long time ago about spawning. One of the first questions I asked the biologists when they started showing up on the river to do their testing, I was like, when do they spawn? And the biologist who was in charge of the Guadalupe bass survey said, we got no idea. He said, like, if you ask me when are the largemouth spawning in any lake in the state of Texas, I can tell you down to, like the hour. He says, these river fish we know nothing about.
Wow.
He said, that's part of why we're here. Because that's one of the things in Texas, and one of the things that's kind of neat about these rivers we have. Texas Parks and Wildlife has always considered our rivers an underutilized resource. So there's not a lot of access. Sometimes if there is access, it's really long distance from a put in to a takeout. So, you put a canoe in and you got to cover 12, 15, 20, 25 miles before you get to another takeout. So most of our rivers do not get a lot of pressure. The Guadalupe, because of the trout fishing and the way it's been kind of set up, a lot of pressure during the winter. But the vast majority of our Guadalupe bass streams don't see a lot of pressure. So they're pretty mysterious little fish. So we're still finding stuff out about them even now. Yeah.
Man, I want to catch one. I'm putting that on my list. So how big was the fish?
It was 3.7 pounds, not 3 pounds, 7 ounces. So 3.7. Yeah.
Got it.
Now, I could be wrong. It could be 3 pounds, 7 ounces. But yeah, but I think since then there may be an IGFA all tackle record that's 3 pounds, 11 ounces. And I don't know if that's pending or if that's, the record, but under 4 pounds.
Yeah, got it.
So.
Duck Camp knows that life is not a highway. It's more like a gravel road where the asphalt ends and a chalky white cloud rises up behind to let you know good things lie ahead. Duck Camp's best in-class fishing and hunting apparel has been tested out there, from Alaska's backcountry to the duck blinds of Louisiana. From buttery soft bamboo sun hoodies to brush pants to iconic Game Series hats, you can gear up for your next gravel road moment at duckcamp.com.
And did that fish live happily ever after in the Cabela's tank?
Well, so the guy who caught the fish, Brian Townsend, he's a dermatologist here in Austin. He went to Cabela's and he didn't feel like they were sufficiently excited about having the fish there. So he's like, I'm going to go get the fish and take it back and put it back in the river.
Wow.
And did he?
Well, Parks and Wildlife found out about that. They took the fish to their fishery center out in Athens, Texas, and they kept the fish there until it died. And it lived out the rest of its life in like absolute fish luxury.
Yeah. I mean, this is a kid's book in the making or something.
Yeah.
The luckiest fish alive. I love it.
Hey, Alvin, I have never been to the Texas Hill Country. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not super sure I know exactly what we're talking about. I've heard about it forever and never. Tell us about the Texas Hill Country. Where is it? What is it? Why do you love it so much?
It's kind of this area maybe as far south as like San Antonio, maybe as far north as Waco. And it's just, there's a really, really diverse geological area in the central part of Texas. Like there's some of the oldest exposed rocks on the planet. Like there's some rocks in the hill country that are like 1.5 billion years old. Fairly arid, but lots of trees. It's not like West Texas where it's sagebrush and all that. We've got lots of live oaks and junipers and all kinds of stuff. On the rivers, we've got cypress trees, which, you would think of cypress trees, you think swamps, but especially like the Nueces River, which is one that's really kind of picturesque, a full tunnel of cypress trees in places where, so like you're fishing and you look up and it's like you might as well be in a cypress jungle in Louisiana swamps. It's a really unique area. And my old joke was like, people think Texas is all hot, flat, and dry. And the vast majority of it probably is. But where we are is kind of like a little oasis there in the middle of the state.
Alvin, so you and I share some passions. One of them is our hatred of litter and trash. I mean, I see it. I pick it up everywhere I go in the boat. I mean, my kids know if we see something, we're getting it. They're now obsessed, right? Plastic water bottles. I'm on a crusade against those things.
Oh, man.
I mean, you really had an impact down there, right? Tell us a little bit about what that program is.
So this will be our 6th event this year, and we're calling it the LoCo Trash Bash because the lower Colorado River is fondly known as the LoCo because it's pretty wild, especially the section right next to Austin. But it all started on my birthday a few years back. I decided I owed it to the river to go out and just fill my boat up with trash because I've had a lot of good times on that river. Made a living on that river, and I was like, I just owe it. So in celebration of my birthday, I'm going to go out and pick up trash. And my wife went with me, and we filled the boat up in no time. I mean, like filled it up. And right then and there, we were like, okay, this is bad. We got to figure out something. So we started this trash cleanup, and we focus on the first, depending on the year, maybe 40 or 50, maybe even 60 miles of river below Austin. The vast majority of all that garbage, floating plastic bottles, gets deposited there. Anytime there's a high water event, all that stuff flushes out of the creeks and the streets because the Colorado River is in the middle of Austin, and then it just goes downstream. And we're averaging like 10 tons of trash per cleanup.
Wow.
Year number 5, we went over 50 tons total. And as all volunteers, we average around 200 people. Everybody that shows up are people that use the river, whether they're fishing or canoers or kayakers. For me, a big part of it is actually just trying to get more people out there, more people aware of it. For the longest time, like I said, the rivers in Texas are kind of underutilized resource. And for the longest time, you could go out there, because we fish about the first 100 miles of the river. And I used to jokingly say, like, if there's 10 boats on that 100 miles, it's total gridlock. There's just not a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
And which was great. But as the city of Austin has grown, there's a lot more negative impacts on the river. I'm on a mission to get as many people as possible out there and aware of the fact that we have this river, because I take somebody fishing and we may cover 6, 8, 10 miles of river. And if they're from Austin, I'm like, I guarantee you can tell 100 people that in Austin that you went on the Colorado River and you caught a Guadalupe bass and you saw a bald eagle, and 95 of those 100 people are going to be like, you went where and did what?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great point that has come up a few times in talking to other guides and folks passionate about the environment is you got to know about it to care about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. You're putting people on something they haven't seen. And typically when you're on it or in it or whatever it may be, it's just so stunning and beautiful that you can't help but care, right? It is. Yeah. It's a good way to do it.
Hey, Alvin, I know you're also on the advisory board of Tomorrow's Fish. Is that right?
Yes.
So that's the campaign of the American Fly Fishing Trade Association. that advocates in terms of a warming climate. Now, you live in Texas and you're advocating about save our winters. I mean, what kind of winters are you really trying to save out there, Alvin? Tell us about these larger issues that go way beyond trash pickup on the LoCo.
Well, I mean, there's not much winter here. There's never been much winter here. But what we're feeling is much more hot and brutal and dry summers. So when we were talking earlier about the Guadalupe River, where we have the trout, it's a tailwater. And that, like I said, that is the most popular river fishery in the state of Texas. I'm going to just say that. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. But I do remember when that river flowed during the winter was, 300 to 500 CFS. We've had winters where it never got below 1,000 CFS because the lake was full and there's water coming in the upper end of the river. Nowadays, 50 CFS. Oof. I looked the other day, it was like 30 CFS. And so that impacts that fishery because in order for the water to stay cold enough for the trout to survive, they need about 150 to 200 CFS. Otherwise, summertime comes and, they all die, or the vast majority of them die. I would say the top two Guadalupe bass fisheries, in my opinion, are the Colorado River for size of fish. That's where that record fish came from, and also really good numbers of fish. But the other one is the Llano River, hands down the best place to go and just catch a ton of Guadalupe bass, and some pretty good sized ones, not as big as the Colorado. That river has been impacted by droughts as well. We had average flows are probably 150, 200 CFS. And, last couple of summers, it got down to zero in places, 20, 30 CFS. Luckily, that fish is pretty hardy, and shockingly, we actually have pretty good numbers of fish still. But that's the kind of stuff that we're all worried about. The fact that we have these beautiful spring-fed streams in the Texas Hill Country is pretty amazing, but they're all dependent on that water in the aquifers, and the aquifers are getting lower. There's more people moving to Central Texas, and so that water gets used for, different purposes, whether it's cities, agriculture, and that's taken away from the rivers. And we just need more people to advocate for the rivers. People are doing stuff like, I'm a billionaire, former energy company CEO, and I bought a huge piece of property on the upper Llano River, and I'm going to file a petition so that I can put a dam on my property and potentially shut down the flow of the river. That guy got shut down.
Yeah, good.
Not all of those guys, but that kind of stuff goes on just because people are not aware of what's going on out there. So it's just crazy to say, but more people out there on the water is at this point only going to help in the long run, because we need more voices. We need more people who are going, that's my favorite river, I need to take care of it,
Hey, let me break in here for listeners that may not know. CFS is cubic feet per second. So that's sort of a measurement of a flow. You can imagine a cubic foot, a foot by foot of water would be one. So when you're getting down to a river that's being fed by 20 CFS, it ain't much of a river.
I mean, that's a trickle.
No, that's a trickle. Yeah.
Hey, let's move south. Let's move to the coast.
Yeah, let's talk salt.
Smack down on the coast. Texas redfish versus Louisiana redfish. Go, Alvin.
All right. I had somebody the other day email us and say, I want to go during the bull redfish run and catch some redfish in Texas. And we do have bull redfish, but it's not like the Louisiana thing. So I always tell people that Texas coast redfishing is probably a lot more like bone fishing than Louisiana coast redfishing. It's unbelievable the amount of clear, shallow water that we have in Texas, and the juvenile redfish that live there year round. Just an amazing resource. And on an 8-way, a 25-inch redfish is a 25-inch redfish. It's still a good fish. Yeah. And I fish in Louisiana. Louisiana is awesome. you can go over there and catch some giant reds. But the thing is most of the time you're not going to be sight casting to them in, 18 inches of crystal clear water. That's the thing I think Texas has over Louisiana. It's just the sight casting, the clear water. And because we do have the barrier island system and we're fishing inshore, a lot of the stuff in Louisiana, I mean, everybody's like, if you're going to Louisiana, especially during the prime season, you better have like at least 3 or 4 days and plan on not fishing half of them because you're going to get bad weather. We typically have a little bit more stable weather. And, in our redfish, they're there basically year round. So I think there's a lot more opportunities to have a long stretch of stable weather on the Texas coast as well. And we do occasionally get some big fish moving into the flats, especially if you're fishing areas that are close to a pass, especially like Port O'Connor, Texas. That's probably the best place to go catch a bull redfish in Texas because they've got a really good pass there. If conditions are right and you can get out, you can catch bulls in the morning or stay there, catch all day, and then you can get back in the backcountry and catch smaller fish in super shallow water. Variety, I think, is one of the things that's cool about Texas. We got some variety.
You heard it here, T. Edward. Texas wins the Smackdowns.
That's what I'm hearing. The good thing is as anglers, we got it all, man. There's so much out there.
Yeah, you just got to do a little bit of everything. If you want to catch a bunch of big old redfish, you need to go to Louisiana.
So, Alvin, you have 2 kids, right?
Three.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old are they?
10, 14, and 25.
Okay. And do they fish? Are they eating up with it like you, or are they...
So the 25-year-old, all girls, the 25-year-old actually works for the guide service. So If you send us an email, she's probably answering your email, booking your trip and all that. And she's gotten pretty good at rowing the boat. So
nice.
She can fish. She knows the business inside and out. So she knows all about everything fly fishing wise. Mm-hmm. The 14-year-old, she likes to go.
Yeah.
The fishing part, she could take it or leave it, but she never complains about going. She likes being out there. And then the 10-year-old is kind of like our angler. She
really, yeah.
Ever since she was a little kid, she's still a little kid, but ever since she was like 6, she would fish all day, catching, not catching. She may have changed her mind like kids do, but at one point she said when she grew up, she was going to be a mom and a fishing guy.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
That is terrific. Yeah. Well done, buddy. I don't care what else you do. That's well done.
Hey, tell me about the Devil's River. Do you run the Devils? I did one trip on the Devils. What a spot. Holy cow.
Yeah, that is probably the most pristine river in the state. I've done a bunch of trips out there over the years. Right now we're doing a trip. Our guide service is doing a trip. We got a great connection and we have access to the ranch, the headwaters of the Devil's River. It's the Hudspeth Ranch. This ranch has been, I want to say this lady's family maybe homesteaded this property like the Indians owned it before they did. So we've got the first 7 miles of the river that are all contained within the ranch. And we've been doing trips out there the last few years. It can be a lot of work, though. The wind starts blowing upstream and you're trying to get downstream.
We had wind. We were in folding kayaks and camping, but the trip was also sponsored, and nothing against Tenkara, but was sponsored by a Tenkara company. So if you can imagine fishing the Devil's River in howling wind with a freaking Tenkara rod.
Did y'all catch anything?
God, man, I tell you, here's how we caught stuff, Alvin. My buddy and I, we saw the wind forecast and we're like, this is going to be horrible, eh? So we jumped into the Walmart, I think in Del Rio.
Yeah.
On the way out and bought like the cheapest little spinning rods that we could hide because the Tenkara people weren't going to be happy about it. And and so we were like, when they were around, we'd be dabbling the Tenkara rods, but they turned their back, man. We were whipping out the beetle spins because that was all we could find at the Walmart. But it was a wild place, the petroglyphs on the walls. It just, God, but man, what I would have done for a 6-weight. Woo!
Yeah. The go-to, I think, for our guys is a 7 because we throw some big crawfish patterns.
Yeah.
The guy whose first fly was a balsa wood balloon frog.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised you throw big patterns.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, your balloon frog wasn't the last thing you designed. You've got a popper, right? Tell us about the
Dedeaux popper.
Yeah, the Dedeaux popper. Let's hear it.
So that one was kind of a offshoot from one that I used to call the flip-flop popper.
All right.
And I was out on the Llano River, and we were just loading the boat up, and I looked down, and there's this chartreuse flip-flop just floating down the river, just one. And I picked it up, trash.
Yeah.
Throw it in the truck. And then I got home and I was about to throw it in the trash. And I was like, that's the perfect color for a frog popper. So I made a bunch of them with that. And of course they worked. And for a while there, we were hitting all the dollar stores, buying the cheap flip-flops and carving them. But my whole thing with tying flies, if it takes more than, 5 minutes, I'm just like, oh, God, this is too much trouble, especially when, your clients throw them up in the tree and you lose them. So I figured out a way to make a popper with 2 sheets of flat foam, and it's mostly just super glue.
Yeah.
There's like a very little bit of fly tying involved. You tie the tail on and then everything else is glued. And that has been one of the best poppers. It casts really well, and just the way the front of it is designed, it makes a big pop without having to throw a giant popper. So you can throw something on 6-weight that will make as much noise as a popper you'd throw on a 10-weight. And it's super popular around here because we've all caught tons of fish on them. And then people who just get into fly tying, it's really easy to make. And you get out there and they work. And the guys over there at Blue Line Fly Company are actually going next year to start selling them commercially.
Cool. Are they going to call it the Dedeaux popper?
Yeah.
Yes. That's congrats, man. That's cool. One thing I've learned during this interview is just the diversity of the types of water that you have there in Austin. And I'm curious, let's just say you've got the day off and we know you're going to go fishing on that day off. What's your ideal day?
Well, right now, it'll depend.
Okay.
I'm going fishing tomorrow with a couple of our guides for fun. And we're going to go hit the Colorado River.
Right.
But then come May, I will have my trailer all set up down in Rockport, and the day off, I'll be chasing some redfish. Nice. So that's coming.
Yeah,
so
I like it.
Like one of our guides has really gotten a really good program down fly fishing for bass on the lakes.
Yeah.
And I've always been a river person, but I've been fishing with him on the lake the last couple of years, and I was like, man, that's pretty awesome too. So if he called me up and said, hey, let's hit the lake tomorrow, I'd go do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. People always ask me, well, what's your favorite destination, or what's on your bucket list, or what's your favorite place to go fishing? And my answer is usually wherever I'm going next.
Yes. Yeah. People ask, are you a fly fisherman? I'm like, I love to fish any way I can catch those fish. I love fishing.
I mean, it's tough to see all the new people on the water sometimes, and you're in your favorite spot. But it's good that the tent's getting bigger, for sure, Alvin. And I'm curious, as a black fishing guide, as a black entrepreneur, was there a time when you felt outside the tent? How did you navigate those waters? Or maybe they weren't as difficult as others.
Well, I think, and I was thinking about this the other day. There's been some like overt times where I was like, okay, that's just happening because I'm black. Right. That wouldn't be happening otherwise. I think I was lucky because I was always kind of like the outsider. I was the only boy in a house full of girls. A lot of times I was the only black kid at the school, so the fact that I was the only black dude with the fly rod, I mean, I've just, for better or worse, I kind of grew up with this outsider loner mentality. So when things weren't going my way for whatever reason, I just assumed like, that's just how it is. So I was lucky to have that. And that's kind of kept me going and kind of kept me going against all odds. But, part of me putting myself out the way I have was also to help other people who were not as fortunate, and that's one of the greatest compliments I've gotten from young Black anglers, women anglers, just people who are not the typical person you think of when you think of an outdoor person. People have cited me as like, well, I saw Alvin out there and I said, well, hell, man, he's, he looks like me. He can do it, then I can do it. Cool. And I've had a couple of people say that in interviews, like people that I didn't even know, So I was like, that's really awesome. And so, I think it's just part of the whole tent's getting bigger. And I think it's up to all of us to try to welcome more people to it. And like you said, it is kind of tough, the fact that there was never anybody on the Colorado River. And it's like my private 100-mile stretch of awesome fishing was great. But I also realized as Austin has gotten bigger, more people and more industry have moved to this little part of Texas, our little river, it's not going to make it if we don't have more people out there trying to take care of it. I can scream to the top of my lungs. I can put out videos on YouTube and everywhere else on the internet every day, but I can't do it by myself. So I do feel like we just need to get more people in general, more diverse crowd out there just to take care of this stuff that we got. It's fragile. It's time to just get as many people out there and get as many people concerned about this as we can. And, we're just going to have to learn how to share. Right. That's all there is to it.
I mean, we're better together. There's no question about it.
Yeah. We're just going to have to learn how to share.
Understand pressure. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I would rather see a lot of pressure from a lot of like-minded anglers as opposed to a lot of pressure from industries that want to just destroy the natural resources. So, let people get out there and play, and they'll be ready to keep an eye on it and take care of it long after I'm gone. I want my 10-year-old to be able to go out there and fish that river and have the same experience that I'm having now. So what if there's more people out there? As long as the water's still clear and clean and the fish are still happy, then I'll be happy.
Nice. Man, Alvin, I knew you were a cool dude when I was doing research on you, but I didn't know you were this cool. This has been fun. I want to come to the Trash Bash. I want to catch a Guadalupe bass. I appreciate what you're doing, man. I really do.
Well, thanks for having me. It's fun.
This has been fabulous, Alvin. We so much appreciate you spending time with us and shining a light on a little part of a big old state that just looms so large in the Southern presence, man. We couldn't have asked for a better ambassador for that. We appreciate it.
Well, the best thing about it is that I am having fun. So, all this stuff is cool, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy. So I guess that means I'm doing the right thing.
I'd say he's doing the right thing. How about you, T. Edward?
Man, doing the right thing and raising the bar. When you think about what he's done for conservation, it really does inspire the rest of us to take care of the places we love.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody who's picking up trash is close to my heart. That man is special.
He is. And if you want to learn more about Alvin, he has a really strong presence on YouTube. Just punch in Alvin Dedeaux. You're going to learn a lot, you're going to laugh a lot, and you're going to get to know this guy even better.
All right, my friend, that's it for this episode. Wild South comes to you from Garden & Gun Magazine. This episode was produced and edited by Christine Fennessy, with music by our longtime friends and terrific fishermen, Woody Platt and Bennett Sullivan. You can find us wherever you get your shows.
And when you do find us, leave us a review. We'd love to hear what you think. We care about your thoughts. These reviews matter.
They do. And we're readers, so we're going to read them. All right, from here in Charleston, I'm Dave DiBenedetto.
And here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Eddie Nickens. We'll see you next time on the Wild South.